My name is Margaret Collins. I am 74 years old, and until that night, I believed I had seen every kind of evil this world could throw at me. I was wrong. And I am so grateful for every single one of you who listens, comments, and shares. You are the reason I have the courage to tell this. God bless you all. Now let me tell you what happened. It was raining hard outside. The kind of rain that makes the walls hum and the roof crackle. My body was weak, my joints aching from days of fever. The doctor had told me to rest, to let the antibiotics do their work, but the pain in my chest made it hard to breathe. My granddaughter had gone home for the evening to get some sleep, promising to come back in the morning. I was alone, wrapped in my thick knitted blanket, when I heard the knock. First, I thought it was my imagination. The fever had been giving me strange dreams lately. But the knock came again, slow, deliberate. I dragged myself up, each step feeling like it weighed 100 pounds, and opened the door. There he was. Pastor Gregory. My pastor for the past 22 years. The man who had buried my husband, baptized my grandchildren, and visited me every Christmas without fail. His tall frame filled the doorway, his white clerical collar glowing in the dim hallway light. "Margaret," he said softly, his deep voice carrying warmth, "the Lord told me to come and anoint you tonight. You've been on my heart all day." My relief was instant. I had been praying for comfort, for someone to pray with me. I stepped aside and let him in. He carried a small bottle of oil and his worn Bible. I didn't notice until later that his eyes were different that night. Not the kind eyes I was used to. There was something else in them, something I couldn't quite place. We prayed. Or at least that's how it started. He read from Psalms, his voice steady and commanding. Then he asked me to close my eyes while he anointed me. I felt the cool oil on my forehead, his thumb pressing firmly. But then, his hands didn't stop there. First I froze. I thought maybe I was imagining it, that maybe it was part of the blessing. But no, his touch was no blessing. His hands wandered lower, sliding to places that had nothing to do with prayer. My body went cold, even though I was burning with fever. I opened my eyes and looked at him, and the expression on his face was not one of a man of God. It was something dark, something hungry. "Pastor." My voice trembled. But he only smiled and said, "The Spirit moves in mysterious ways, Margaret. Let me heal you completely." I wanted to scream to push him away, but my body was weak, my voice trapped in my throat. And then, that's when the sound of the front gate slamming made him jerk his head toward the door. I will never forget the look in his eyes at that moment. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Before that night, before the oil, before the betrayal, there was a time when I would have trusted Pastor Gregory with my life. He was more than a pastor to me. He was family. When my husband died suddenly of a heart attack 17 years ago, Pastor Gregory was the one who sat by my hospital bed, holding my hand as I cried. He had been there for the christening of my first grandson, and he had led the prayers when I nearly lost my home during a bad financial year. I had no reason to doubt him. I lived alone in a modest little house at the edge of town. My children had all moved away for work, and most of my days were filled with gardening, knitting, and volunteering at the church food pantry. It wasn't a glamorous life, but it was peaceful. I like peaceful. That peace started to crumble the day I fell sick. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I had just finished making a pot of vegetable soup when the dizziness hit me. One moment I was stirring the pot, and the next the room was spinning. My knees buckled, and I barely caught myself on the counter before hitting the floor. My neighbor, Mrs. Turner, found me slumped in a chair when she came by to borrow some sugar. She insisted on taking me to the clinic. The doctor diagnosed me with pneumonia and told me I needed complete rest. My granddaughter, Lily, offered to stay with me for a few days. She cooked, cleaned, and made sure I took my medicine on time. I felt loved and cared for. But even in those early days, I couldn't ignore the feeling that something else was coming. You ever have that sense in your gut, that quiet whisper that says, "This is just the calm before the storm"? That's how it felt. And I had no idea that Storm would come wearing a pastor's collar. The first strange thing happened 3 days before that night. Pastor Gregory visited me after Sunday service. He brought a bouquet of lilies and a container of chicken soup. He prayed with me, but his prayer was different. He kept holding my hand longer than usual. His thumb traced circles on my palm as he prayed. His eyes fixed on me in a way that made me uncomfortable. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, this was Pastor Gregory. He wouldn't cross that line, would he? 2 days later, he called me late at night. Said God had put me in his spirit. Asked if I was alone. I told him Lily was asleep in the next room. He chuckled softly and said, "It's good to have company when you're weak." Something about the way he said weak made my stomach twist. I tried to brush it off. Until the night it happened. Until the knock on the door. Until the oil. Until his hands. And the sound of the front gate. Who was at the gate that night? And did they save me, or did they make things worse? Thank you for watching and for helping me reach 5,000 subscribers. If you want to hear what happened when that gate slammed and what I did next, make sure you like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. If you want, I can move straight into the next chapter where the gate slam mystery unfolds and we see whether it was a rescue or a new danger. This is where the tension will spike again before dropping into the next emotional low. The slam of the gate outside rang like a gunshot in the night. Pastor Gregory's hand froze mid-touch, his eyes darting toward the sound. My breath caught in my throat, not just because of fear, but because for the first time since he stepped inside, I saw something flicker across his face that looked like fear. "Who's here?" he whispered, as if talking to himself. I didn't answer. My mind was spinning too fast. Whoever it was, neighbor, family, or stranger, they had no idea what they were walking into. The urge to call out was strong, but so was the dread that he might turn on me before help could arrive. Then came the footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching against the gravel path that led to my front porch. Pastor Gregory's posture changed. The warm, pious man my church had adored for decades was gone. In his place stood someone tense, guarded, his jaw clenched tight. The doorbell rang. For a split second I thought about pretending nothing was wrong. But the feel of his hand still on my arm burned like a brand, and the shame in my chest was already threatening to swallow me. I pulled away, and this time he let me. He straightened his collar, smoothed his shirt, and forced a smile so practiced it made my stomach turn. "I'll get it," I croaked, my voice barely above a whisper. He stepped aside, but not before leaning close enough for me to smell the faint trace of peppermint on his breath. "Remember," he murmured, "God sees everything." I swallowed hard and opened the door. Standing there was Mrs. Turner, my neighbor, the same woman who had taken me to the clinic days earlier. She was holding a small basket of muffins, her raincoat dripping on my welcome mat. "Oh, Margaret, I saw the pastor's car outside and thought I'd just drop these by," she said cheerfully. "How are you feeling, dear?" Before I could answer, Pastor Gregory stepped forward with the charm of a man who'd never done a wrong thing in his life. "Sister Turner, bless you for checking on Margaret. I was just here praying over her. The Lord's presence has been so strong tonight." I felt my stomach clench. His words were smooth, but his eyes flicked toward me in a silent warning. Mrs. Turner smiled politely, clearly unaware of the tension in the room. "Would you like to stay for tea?" she asked him. "Oh, I can't tonight," he replied with that same easy smile. "But perhaps another time." He placed a hand on my shoulder, and I swear my skin crawled before turning toward the door. "Rest well, Margaret. I'll check on you again soon." And just like that he was gone. I didn't move for a moment, just stood there watching the taillights of his car disappear into the wet night. Mrs. Turner was fussing about the rain dripping off her coat, asking if I'd eaten dinner yet, but her voice felt far away. My mind was replaying every second of what had just happened. I should have told her right then. I should have said, "Mrs. Turner, please don't leave me alone. That man just..." But the words stuck in my throat like thorns. Why? Because for over 2 decades, Pastor Gregory had been the face of our church. The man people trusted with their confessions, their grief, their marriages. If I said something against him, who would believe me? And even if they did, what would it cost me to tell? That night, after Mrs. Turner left, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the old house made me flinch. The rain had slowed, but inside my head the storm was only getting louder. I tried to pray, but my words felt hollow. The next morning, Lily returned. She found me pale with dark circles under my eyes. "Grandma, you look worse," she said, setting down her bag. "Did you sleep at all?" I shook my head. "No. Lily, something happened last night." Her eyes widened. What do you mean?" I hesitated, looking into her young face. She was only 22, full of energy and optimism, the kind of person who still believed the world could be fixed with enough kindness. I didn't want to shatter that, but I also couldn't keep this inside. I told her. Every word. Her jaw tightened, her hands curling into fists. "That's disgusting. We have to tell someone." "I can't," I whispered. "Not yet. People will think I'm lying. They'll say I misunderstood. And if it gets back to him before I'm ready." Lily didn't like it, but she nodded slowly. "All right. But I'm staying here with you every night. No exceptions." For a few days things seemed quiet. Pastor Gregory didn't call or come by. I told myself maybe it was over. But deep down I knew men like him didn't just stop. And I was right. The following Sunday I didn't go to church. My fever had eased, but my body was still weak, and I couldn't bring myself to sit in the same room as him. Lily went instead, promising to take notes on the sermon for me. She came back looking unsettled. "What is it?" I asked. She hesitated. "He talked about you during the sermon." My heart skipped. "What did he say?" "That God was testing you with illness, but you were too proud to accept help. That sometimes when people reject God's healing, they suffer longer than they should." I felt my hands tremble. That wasn't a sermon. That was a warning. Public one. The next day I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single piece of paper with 4 words written in neat handwriting. "Don't fight the spirit." I didn't need to guess who it was from. That night I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the room looked like him. Every sound felt like footsteps approaching. I thought about calling the police, but what would I tell them? That my pastor touched me and then sent a vague letter. Would they even care? The days blurred together after that. I avoided answering the phone. I kept the doors locked, even during the day. But the fear didn't leave me, it grew. Then one afternoon, about a week later, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the back door creak open. "Lily!" called out. No answer. I froze, the kettle whistling behind me. Then I heard it, the sound of shoes on the linoleum floor. Low, heavy. I turned around. And there he was, standing in my kitchen. Pastor Gregory. He smiled, holding up the same little bottle of oil. "I told you I'd be back, Margaret. God's work isn't finished yet." I took a step back, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Get out." He tilted his head, as if amused. "Is that any way to talk to your shepherd?" I said get out. My voice cracked, but I forced myself to stand tall. His smile faded. "You can't hide behind that girl forever. And when she's not here." The sound of the front door unlocking cut him off. Lily's voice floated in from the hallway. I looked back toward the sound for just a second, and when I turned back he was gone. No footsteps, no door slam. Just gone. I don't know how he left so fast, but I knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because now he wasn't just a threat to me. He was a threat to Lily too. And if he thought I was going to stay silent forever, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. If you want to know what happened the next time Pastor Gregory tried to finish God's work in my home, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. I didn't tell Lily what happened in the kitchen that afternoon. At least, not right away. She walked in holding a bag of groceries, humming to herself, completely unaware that just moments before, the man she still referred to as Pastor had been standing in the exact spot where she was now unpacking oranges and bread. My hands were still trembling, but I shoved them into my cardigan pockets so she wouldn't notice. Part of me wanted to blurt it all out, to say, "He was here, Lily. He came in without knocking. He had that oil again." But another part of me, the part that was terrified of making her afraid, held my tongue. That night I barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart leap. I could still see his eyes, the way they had gone cold when I told him to get out. That wasn't the look of a man who would give up easily. The next morning, Lily left early to run errands. I busied myself with knitting by the window, trying to convince myself that daylight meant safety. But then my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. "Hello." There was silence for a moment. Then his voice. "Smooth. To come. Margaret, you're making this harder than it needs to be." I gripped the phone tighter. "Pastor Gregory, don't call me again." He chuckled, a slow, chilling sound that made my skin prickle. "If you don't let the Spirit move, the Spirit will find another way in. And I promise, He always gets in." Hung up. My heart was pounding so loud, I almost didn't hear the sound of something sliding through my mail slot. I walked to the door and found a small envelope on the floor. No return address, just my name written neatly in black ink. Inside was a single photograph, taken from outside my house, of me sitting in the living room the night before. I felt the room tilt. He had been watching me. I called Lily immediately, but she didn't pick up. I paced the living room, clutching the photo until my hands hurt. When she finally called back, I told her everything. Her reaction was immediate. "That's it. We're going to the police." We drove straight to the station. I gave my statement, showed them the photo, and told them about the late-night visits and the letter. The officer, a young man who looked barely older than Lily, listened politely but kept glancing at the clock. "So, he touched you but didn't actually, he asked. I stared at him. "He tried. And he's stalking me." The officer nodded slowly. "Well, without concrete evidence or a witness, it's tricky. But we can file a report and keep it on record." I left the station feeling worse than when I'd gone in. It was clear they weren't going to do much unless something more serious happened, and that terrified me. That night, Lily stayed up late, scrolling on her phone. "We need to start documenting everything," she said. "If he calls, record it. If he comes here, I'll take pictures." I agreed. But deep down, I hated the idea that we had to wait for him to strike again just to be taken seriously. And strike again he did. 2 nights later, Lily was in the shower, and I was alone in the living room when the doorbell rang. I froze, my heart instantly racing. Slowly, I moved toward the window and peeked through the curtains. It was him. Standing in the rain, holding an umbrella in one hand and the bottle of oil in the other. I didn't open the door. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording through the window. He didn't knock again, just stood there, staring at the door like he could see straight through it into me. After a minute, he turned and walked away. When Lily came out of the bathroom, I showed her the video. Her eyes narrowed. "We need cameras. Now." The next day we bought 2 security cameras and set them up, one at the front door, one at the back. I thought maybe that would make me feel safer. But it didn't. Because security cameras don't stop a man who truly believes God is on his side. That Sunday I stayed home again. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it and felt my blood run cold. It was a picture of Lily, taken that morning, leaving the grocery store. The message read, "She's pretty. Be careful who she talks to." I called Lily immediately, my voice shaking. She was fine walking home, but the fact that he was now following her made my knees weak. That was the breaking point for me. The next day I called an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His name was Daniel, a retired police detective who had been part of our congregation before moving to another town. He listened quietly as I told him everything. "Margaret," he said finally, "men like this don't stop unless they're made to stop. I'll come by tonight. We'll talk." When he arrived, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Relief. Daniel had always been steady, dependable, the kind of man who kept his word. He examined the photo, the letter, the video. Then he looked at me seriously. This isn't just harassment. He's escalating. You need to be ready for him to get bolder. How do I stop him? Asked. Daniel leaned forward. You set a trap. Blinked. A trap. He nodded. If he's coming here to anoint you, give him the chance, but make sure the police are watching when he does. The idea made my stomach churn. But part of me knew he was right. The police needed proof, and this was the only way to get it. We spent the next few days planning. Daniel reached out to a friend still on the force who agreed to help. Quietly. We picked a night when Lily would stay with a friend, leaving me alone in the house. The cameras would be running, and Daniel's friend would be parked down the street in an unmarked car. I hated every part of it, but I hated living in fear even more. The night came. I sat in my armchair, the lights low, pretending to be half asleep. My heart was hammering so loud, I was sure he'd hear it if he came in. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Then, right on cue, the back door opened. I didn't have to look to know it was him. I could smell the faint scent of peppermint, hear the soft sound of his shoes on the floor. Margaret, he whispered, the spirit told me you were ready now. I gripped the armrests, forcing myself to stay still as he stepped closer. The bottle of oil glinted in his hand. And just as he reached out toward me, the front door burst open. Police. Hands where I can see them. Pastor Gregory froze, his eyes wide, the mask finally slipping from his face. Daniel stepped in behind the officers. His gaze locked on me, making sure I was all right. For a moment I thought it was over, that the nightmare had ended. But as they dragged him out, Pastor Gregory turned his head toward me and smiled. A slow, knowing smile. This isn't finished, Margaret, he said softly. And in that moment, I realized something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't bluffing. If you want to hear what Pastor Gregory did after his arrest, and how far he went to keep me silent, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Next chapter is where we see the disturbing aftermath of his arrest and the dangerous moves he makes from outside the jail. This is where the story's stakes will get even higher. The night they arrested Pastor Gregory, I thought I would finally sleep in peace. But peace didn't come. Even with the echo of the police shouting, "Hands where I can see them," still fresh in my ears, my mind wouldn't rest. I sat in my armchair long after Daniel and the officers left, staring at the spot where he had stood, the bottle of oil still lying on the floor like a snake's shed skin. The house was quiet, but inside my head it felt like every shadow had eyes. I tried to convince myself it was over. The police had caught him inside my home without my permission. They'd seen him holding that oil, ready to anoint me in his twisted way. That had to mean something, right? The next morning, Lily returned. I told her everything. The way they'd come in, the look on his face as they led him away. She hugged me tight and said, "It's done, Grandma. He can't hurt you anymore." I wanted to believe her. But 2 days later I got a phone call. It was from the county jail. "This is an automated call from the detention facility. You have a call from Gregory Holmes." Froze. My thumb hovered over the button to hang up, but before I could press it, his voice came through. "Margaret," he said softly, like we were old friends catching up. "You think you've won. You haven't. Men like me don't stay in here long." I slammed the phone down, my heart racing so hard I had to sit down. When Lily came home, I told her about the call. Her face went pale. "He's taunting you. He knows you're scared." He nodded. "And he's right. I am scared." That night Daniel called. "They're setting bail for him," he said. "It's not high. If someone posts it, he could be out by tomorrow." My hands started to shake. Tomorrow. But he broke into my home. "I know," Daniel said grimly. "But the law sees it differently. They'll argue he was making a pastoral visit and that you invited him in before. So it's a misunderstanding." I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab every person who ever praised him from the pulpit and make them see who he really was. But the truth was, even if I did, some would never believe me. Sure enough, the next evening Daniel called again. "He's out." That single sentence made the air in my chest feel heavy. For a couple of days, nothing happened. I tried to live normally, knitting by the window, cooking small meals, even watering my plants. But the silence didn't feel safe. Felt like the pause before the next strike. Then the letters started. The first one came in a plain envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper with one verse from the Bible written in red ink. "Touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm." The second letter came 2 days later. This time it wasn't a verse. It was a photograph of my front door, taken at night. Lily was furious. She wanted to take the letters to the police, but Daniel advised against it just yet. "We need more," he said. "Enough to make them act without giving him a chance to twist it." It was hard to explain the feeling I had during those days. It wasn't just fear, it was humiliation. This man had tried to violate me, been caught, and was still walking around free, still daring to threaten me. It made me feel small, powerless. And I hated it. But there's something about being pushed to the edge. At some point the fear starts turning into something else. Something sharper. One night, as I sat alone in my living room, I thought back to the years I had spent in that church. The bake sales, the choir rehearsals, the endless prayers for the sick and the grieving. I had given my time, my money, my trust. And Pastor Gregory had used all of it like a weapon against me. No more. The next morning I told Daniel I was ready to fight. We met at his house to plan. "If he wants to use the church as his shield," Daniel said, "then we take the shield away. You need to go public, and I mean public. Not just the police. The whole congregation." The thought made my stomach turn. Standing up in front of people I'd known for decades, telling them that the man they called Shepherd had come into my home and tried to touch me. I could already hear the whispers, feel the stares. But I also knew this: if I stayed silent, he would just find another woman to anoint. Maybe someone even younger, even more vulnerable. We decided to wait until Sunday. Daniel would come with me for protection, and Lily insisted on being there too. That week was the longest of my life. Every creak of the house at night made me sit up in bed. Every time I left the house, I scanned the street for his car. I didn't tell many people what I was planning. The fewer who knew, the better. Sunday morning came. I wore my best navy blue dress and my husband's old silver cross around my neck. My hands shook the entire drive to the church. When we walked in, people greeted me with smiles, some surprised to see me after my illness. I nodded, forcing myself to smile back. But when my eyes met Pastor Gregory's across the sanctuary, my breath caught. He was standing at the pulpit, smiling like nothing had ever happened. The service began. Hymns were sung, announcements made. Then came the sermon. And in the middle of it, he started talking about wolves in sheep's clothing, about how Satan sometimes used beloved members of the flock to tear down the shepherd. I felt Lily's hand squeeze mine under the pew. When he finished, I stood up. The room went silent. "Pastor Gregory," I said, my voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear, "I need to speak." He tilted his head, still smiling. "Of course, Sister Margaret." I turned to face the congregation. My friends, my neighbors, people I had cooked for, prayed with, laughed with. And I told them. Every word. The knock at my door. Boyle. His hands. The letters. The threats. By the time I finished, there was a stunned silence. Some people looked shocked. Others looked angry at me. Then, from the back of the room, a voice spoke. "She's lying." I turned to see Deacon Harris, one of Pastor Gregory's closest allies, standing with his arms crossed. "I've known this man for 30 years. He's a man of God. You're sick, Margaret. Maybe your mind is playing tricks on you." I felt my knees weaken. This was exactly what I had feared. And then Pastor Gregory stepped forward. His hands raised as if to calm the crowd. "Brothers and sisters," he said, "I forgive her. She's unwell. We must pray for her healing. The humiliation was like a slap to my face. I walked out, my legs trembling, Lily and Daniel close behind me. Outside, the air was cold, but my face was burning. Daniel leaned in and said quietly, "You did the right thing. It's just the first battle. The war's not over." I nodded, but my heart was heavy, because as I glanced back at the church doors, I saw Pastor Gregory standing there, smiling that same slow smile. And I knew he wasn't finished with me yet. If you want to know what happened when Pastor Gregory took his revenge for me speaking out, and how far he went to silence me, please like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Next chapter is where his retaliation after being exposed in church becomes dangerous and forces Margaret to take a more extreme stand. That's where the tension will really spike. When I woke up the morning after confronting Pastor Gregory in church, I expected to feel lighter, proud even for speaking the truth. Instead, I woke with a knot in my stomach and the sinking realization that telling the truth in front of that congregation had only drawn the battle lines deeper. I'd spent the night replaying the faces I saw in the pews. Some were sympathetic, their eyes wide in disbelief. Others looked at me with suspicion, their brows furrowed like I had just spat on the altar. But the one face that wouldn't leave my mind was his, Pastor Gregory's. Calm, smiling, like a man who had already planned his next move. Daniel had warned me before we even stepped into the church. When a man like him is cornered, he gets dangerous. I was about to find out just how right he was. By mid-morning the phone calls began. The first was from Sister Agnes, a longtime church member. "Margaret," she said in a hushed voice, "I believe you. Really do. But you've stirred up a hornet's nest. People are saying you're trying to destroy the church. They're calling you bitter." The second call wasn't so kind. "You should be ashamed of yourself," a woman snapped before hanging up. And then the third call, the one that made my blood run cold, came from a number I didn't recognize. I answered, hoping it was someone offering support. Instead, a familiar voice slid through the line like oil on glass. "You've made a mistake, Margaret." It was him. "Pastor Gregory," I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. "Don't call me again." He chuckled softly. "You stood in God's house and lied about his servant. That's dangerous, Margaret. You've invited judgment. And judgment can be very creative." I hung up without another word, but my heart was pounding. That call was a threat, whether he wanted to admit it or not. I tried to calm myself by baking, a habit I'd always turned to when my nerves got bad. But halfway through kneading the dough, I noticed a shadow pass by my kitchen window. It wasn't Lily, she was at work. Froze. The shadow passed again, slower this time. I crept to the window and pulled back the curtain just a sliver. My breath caught. Pastor Gregory was standing at the edge of my yard, not moving, just staring at the house. He wasn't in his clerical collar this time, just a plain black coat, but there was no mistaking him. I dropped the curtain and backed away. My first instinct was to call Daniel, but before I could, the sound of something hitting the porch made me jump. I peeked again and saw a white envelope sitting on the doormat. By the time I opened the door, he was gone. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper. No words this time, just a drawing. A crude, childlike sketch of a woman lying in a coffin. My hands trembled so hard I nearly dropped it. When Daniel arrived later, I showed him the drawing. He examined it without speaking, then finally said, "We need to tighten your security. And we need to make sure Lily isn't alone." We installed more cameras the next day, including one pointing straight at the porch. Lily changed her work schedule so she wouldn't have to walk home after dark. But even with all that, I couldn't shake the feeling that Gregory was always one step ahead of us. That Friday, Lily came home with a strange look on her face. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I think someone's been following me." My chest tightened. "What happened?" She explained that on her way home from the grocery store, she'd noticed a dark sedan trailing her slowly. When she turned onto our street, the car sped up and passed her, and in the driver's seat, she swore she saw Pastor Gregory. That was it for me. Enough hiding. Enough waiting for him to choose the next move. Daniel and I decided to file for a restraining order. It wasn't much, but at least it would give the police something concrete to act on if he came near us again. We met with a lawyer who agreed to help. The hearing was scheduled for the following week. But Gregory didn't wait for the court date. 2 nights before the hearing, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. My heart leapt into my throat. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, I heard footsteps inside the house. I crept to my bedroom door and cracked it open just enough to see a shadow moving down the hallway. Tall, broad-shouldered. I dialed Daniel first, whispering, "He's here." "I'm calling the police," Daniel said. "Stay hidden. Don't move." But then I heard Lily scream from her bedroom. Everything in me shifted. Fear evaporated, replaced by something primal. I threw the door open and ran toward her room. Gregory was standing just inside, his hand gripping Lily's arm. She was struggling, trying to push him away. "Let her go," shouted. He turned to me slowly, and that smile, that same smile from the church, spread across his face. "This is what happens, Margaret," he said calmly, "when you turn your back on God's chosen." I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a heavy ceramic lamp, and swung it with every ounce of strength I had. It connected with his shoulder, and he stumbled back. Lily broke free and ran to me. The sound of sirens in the distance made Gregory's eyes narrow. "This isn't over," he said again before slipping out the broken back door. By the time the police arrived, he was gone. They took our statements, looked at the security footage, and finally, seemed to take us seriously. "We'll put out a warrant," one officer said. "If he comes near you again, call 911 immediately." But as they left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was exactly what Gregory wanted. For me to think the worst was behind me. That night I barely slept. I kept replaying the moment I saw him in Lily's room, the calm in his voice as if he was the one in control. And deep down I knew. The next time he came, he wouldn't just leave a drawing or a letter. The next time, he'd come to finish what he started. If you want to hear what happened when Pastor Gregory's next move pushed me past the point of fear and into a fight for my life, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Next chapter is where Margaret will stop being reactive and begin planning her own counterattack, turning the tables on Gregory in a way he never expects. The morning after Gregory broke into my house and grabbed Lily, I woke up feeling like a different woman. Not stronger, not yet, but something had shifted deep inside me. The fear that had been eating me alive for weeks had boiled into something sharper. I was done waiting for the next knock, the next letter, the next shadow outside my window. It was time to stop surviving and start fighting. Lily, on the other hand, was still rattled. She sat at the kitchen table in her pajamas, staring at her untouched toast. "Grandma," she said quietly, "what if he comes back while I'm at work? What if he—" I put my hand over hers. "He won't get the chance. Not this time." Her eyes searched mine. "What are you going to do?" I didn't answer yet. Because the truth was, I had an idea, but saying it out loud would make it real. And I needed to be sure I had the courage to follow through. "Call Daniel. I want to end this," I told him. "Not just make him go away for a few months. I want to make sure he can never hurt me, or anyone else again." There was a long pause on the line. "You're talking about going public again." "Bigger than that," I said. "I want proof so solid that even his most loyal followers can't deny it. Proof that will destroy him." Daniel's voice lowered. "That's dangerous, Margaret. Men like him, when they feel cornered, they can do worse than what you've seen." I gripped the phone tighter. "I know. But if I do nothing, he wins. And I'm not living like that anymore." We made a plan. Step 1 was bait. We'd use what Gregory wanted most, the chance to be alone with me, and let him think I was ready to make peace. Daniel would be nearby with his retired detective friend, both armed with recording devices and ready to step in. It made my skin crawl to think about inviting him near me again, but I reminded myself that this wasn't about giving him power. This was about luring him into a place where he'd show his true self without realizing the whole thing was being documented. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 2 days later, I got a letter in my mailbox. This one handwritten. We can talk. Let me anoint you one last time and then we can both move on. My stomach turned, but I forced myself to write back. Come Friday night. Lone. Daniel hated the idea of setting the meeting for nighttime, but I insisted. Gregory needed to believe I was vulnerable, that I was letting my guard down. Friday came. Lily stayed with a friend, and Daniel set up tiny hidden cameras in the living room. We positioned a microphone under the armchair where I'd be sitting. Daniel and his friend parked an old sedan at the end of the block where they could see my front door but not be seen themselves. At 8:47 p.m. the doorbell rang. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my fingertips. When I opened the door, Gregory stood there with that same smug smile, holding his little bottle of oil like it was a weapon. Margaret, he said smoothly, you've finally come to your senses. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked almost disappointed by how easily I let him in, like he'd been expecting a fight. We sat in the living room. He placed the oil on the coffee table and leaned forward, his voice low. I knew you'd see that resisting me was only hurting you. This is the Lord's work, Margaret. I kept my voice calm, almost soft. Then do it. Anoint me. He smiled wider, like a predator settling in for the kill. As he began, his voice changed. The prayer was low and strange, not like the ones I'd heard in church. His hands moved in ways that had nothing to do with blessing and everything to do with violating. But I didn't stop him. Not yet. Because the tiny camera hidden in the corner was capturing every word, every movement, every vile thing he did under the guise of prayer. Then I saw it, the shift in his face. That same darkness I'd seen the first night he came. And that's when I said it. Gregory, you're on camera. He froze, his hand mid-motion. What? I pointed to the corner. Smile for the people who will see this. Please. The congregation. Everyone. For the first time I saw panic in his eyes. He stood abruptly, knocking over the bottle of oil. You think this will work? You think anyone will believe it's real? I'll tell them you begged me for this. I didn't flinch. Let's see what the footage says. At that exact moment, Daniel and his friend burst through the front door. Gregory spun toward them, his face twisting with rage. You set me up, he spat. No, Daniel said calmly. You set yourself up. Gregory's eyes darted toward the door like he was about to run, but Daniel's friend stepped in front of him. Don't even think about it. They didn't lay a hand on him, they didn't need to. The damage was already done. Gregory shoved past them and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures on my wall rattled. I sank into my chair, my legs shaking, the adrenaline leaving me drained. Daniel sat across from me, his expression grave. We've got enough to bury him, he said. But you need to be ready. Men like him, when they know they've lost, they can get desperate. I nodded, my eyes drifting to the still wet patch on the carpet where his oil had spilled. I've been living in fear for weeks, Daniel. Whatever's coming next, I'm ready for it. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the memory of the look on Gregory's face when I told him he was on camera. It wasn't just anger. It was a promise. And 2 days later, that promise came in the form of a brick through my front window, with a note tied to it. You think you've won? Wait until Sunday. If you want to know what happened on that Sunday, and how Pastor Gregory's final move nearly cost me everything, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. The brick through my window had been bad enough. The shattering glass, the rush of cold air, the reminder that nowhere in my own home was truly safe anymore. But it was the note tied to it that kept me awake all night. You think you've won? Wait until Sunday. It wasn't just a threat. It was a countdown. For the next 3 days, every hour felt like it was moving toward something inevitable. I couldn't stop imagining what he meant. Would he confront me at church? Would he come to my house in broad daylight? Would he do something to Lily? Lily tried to act calm, but I could see the tension in her eyes. She jumped at small noises. She double-checked the locks every night. And when she thought I wasn't looking, she kept her phone in her hand, ready to call Daniel at a moment's notice. Daniel came over the day before Sunday to go over the footage again. We had clear video of Gregory touching me inappropriately while praying. We had audio of him saying things no pastor should ever say. It was damning evidence, the kind that could crush his reputation completely. We need to release this at the right time, Daniel said. Do it too soon and he'll claim it's doctored. Do it too late, and he might hurt someone before it hits him. I looked at him. Oh, Sunday. He nodded slowly. If he's planning something, we make sure his surprise gets met with a bigger one. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had trusted that man. All the times I'd stood in church listening to him preach about purity and holiness while he carried something rotten inside him. The betrayal burned almost as much as the fear. When Sunday morning came, I dressed carefully. A navy skirt, white blouse, and the silver cross my late husband had given me on our 25th anniversary. I wanted to look like myself, the woman the congregation knew, because they needed to see her telling the truth. Daniel met us outside the church. He had his phone ready, the video queued up. Lily walked between us, her chin high, even though I could feel her tension in the way her arm brushed mine. The moment we stepped inside, I felt eyes on me. Some people smiled and waved. Others looked away, whispering behind their hymnals. And then I saw him. Pastor Gregory stood at the front of the sanctuary, wearing his finest robe, white with gold trim, and holding his Bible like it was a shield. His eyes locked on mine, and that slow, knowing smile spread across his face. The service began like any other. Scripture readings. But the entire time I could feel the air thick with anticipation. Finally, Gregory stepped up to deliver the sermon. My brothers and sisters, he began, his voice smooth and warm. We live in dangerous times. Times when the enemy hides in plain sight. When false accusations rise against the true servants of God. My jaw clenched. He went on, weaving a story about betrayal, about how Satan uses the weakest among us to try to bring down the shepherd. Every so often, his gaze would flick toward me, just long enough to let me know exactly who he was talking about. Then, as if it were all part of the plan, he gestured toward the congregation. Today, I will show you the truth. 2 men from the church's security team came forward, wheeling in a large screen and a projector. My stomach dropped. He was going to play something. But what? The lights dimmed. A video began. Grainy footage of me in my living room from weeks ago, sitting in my chair as Gregory stood near me. There was no sound, and the angle made it look like he was simply praying over me. This is the truth, he said as the video played. Twisted minds can turn holy moments into lies. I felt my hands curl into fists. Daniel leaned toward me and whispered, "Time to end this." He stood up, pulling out his phone. "If you want the truth," he said loudly enough for the entire sanctuary to hear, "watch this." He tapped the screen and our video began to play. The real one. Crystal clear with sound. Gregory's voice could be heard whispering inappropriate things. His hands could be seen moving where they had no right to be. Gasps rippled through the room. Gregory's face went pale, then red. "That's a lie," he shouted. "It's fake." But the damage was done. People were turning to each other, whispering furiously. Some got up and walked out. Others stared at him in shock. "You see," Daniel said, "the wolf isn't hiding in the flock. He's been leading it." Gregory's mask finally cracked. His eyes burned with fury as he looked at me. "You'll regret this, Margaret," he said, his voice low and venomous. 2 deacons tried to approach him, but he shoved past them and stormed out of the church. The sanctuary erupted into chaos, some people defending him, others condemning him, everyone talking at once. I just stood there, my hands shaking, my heart racing. Lily took my arm. "Let's go, Grandma." We stepped outside into the bright sunlight. For a moment I felt like I could breathe again. But that feeling shattered when we reached my car and saw the note tucked under the windshield wiper. "If you think today was the end, you're wrong. Tonight I'm coming. If you want to hear what happened that night, and how it became the most dangerous confrontation of my life, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. When I read those words tucked under my windshield, if you think today was the end, you're wrong. Tonight I'm coming. It felt like all the air in my lungs had been stolen. The church service, the gasps when the truth was shown, the way Gregory's face had twisted in rage. All of it had been building to this moment. Tonight. Lily's voice was trembling beside me. "Grandma, we have to call the police right now." Daniel, who had followed us out, took the note from my hand and scanned it. "We will," he said. "But listen to me, if he's serious, the police might not get here in time to stop whatever he's planning. We need to prepare for him ourselves, just in case." The drive home was quiet. Every car behind us, every pedestrian on the sidewalk made me look twice, my heart hammering. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the late afternoon shadows had already begun to stretch across the yard like dark fingers. We called the police first. The dispatcher took our statement but said the same thing I'd been hearing for weeks. "If he shows up, call 911 immediately. We'll send someone out." That was it. No patrol car. No officer stationed outside the house. Just the same hollow promise. Daniel wasn't having it. "All right," he said, locking the front door behind him. "We're not going to sit here like helpless prey. We're going to turn this house into a fortress." We moved quickly. Every window was locked and reinforced with wooden dowels in the tracks. Daniel grabbed a flashlight and a metal baseball bat from the hall closet, placing them within reach of my armchair. He gave Lily his spare pepper spray and had her keep it clipped to her pocket. I could feel my fear morphing into something else. A focused determination. By the time the sun set, the house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Lily sat on the couch with her phone ready to dial. Daniel stood near the front door, and I sat by the window, peeking through the blinds every few minutes. Hours passed. 9 o'clock. 10:30. The street outside was empty. And then, at 11:12 p.m., I saw movement. A figure slipped out from the shadows at the far end of the block, moving low and steady toward the house. Even in the dim light, I knew it was him. "Daniel," I whispered. He was already at the window, his jaw tight. "Stay back. Don't move unless I say." Gregory didn't come straight to the front door. Instead, he circled to the side of the house, disappearing from view. Seconds later, the faint crunch of gravel in the backyard reached my ears. Daniel signaled to Lily to move toward the hallway. "Stay there and don't come out," he told her. Then we heard it, the soft click of the back door handle. It was locked, but the sound came again. Blick, blick. Then a low metallic scrape. He was trying to pick it. Daniel stepped quietly into the kitchen, gripping the bat. I stood frozen in the living room, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The scraping stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd given up. Then the sound of glass shattering cut through the night. "Front window," Daniel barked. I turned just in time to see Gregory's arm reach through the broken glass of the living room window, fumbling for the lock. Without thinking, I grabbed the pepper spray from the coffee table, darted forward, and sprayed directly toward the opening. A guttural yell erupted from outside as he jerked his arm back. But he didn't run. Instead, his voice came through the broken window, low, chilling. "You think this is going to stop me, Margaret? You think you can humiliate me in front of God's people and just live?" Before I could answer, Daniel charged forward and shoved the heavy bookshelf in front of the window. "Call 911, he shouted. I did, my voice shaking as I told the dispatcher he was here, breaking in. Gregory moved to the back of the house again. Seconds later, the pounding on the back door began. "Let me in, Margaret. Let me in and we can settle this between us. Or I'll settle it my way." The pounding grew harder. The door rattled in its frame. Daniel stood ready, the bat raised. Lily was in the hallway, clutching her phone, tears streaming down her face. Then came the worst sound yet, silence. No pounding. No footsteps. Just silence. We waited, straining to hear anything. The hair on the back of my neck was standing up. And then, from directly above us, a slow, deliberate creak. My eyes widened. "The attic," I whispered. "He's in the attic." Daniel's eyes shot upward. "How the hell?" He didn't finish. Another creak, closer this time. Gregory was moving toward the attic hatch above the hallway. Daniel moved fast, positioning himself directly under it. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat, as the faint outline of the hatch began to shift. Then, with a violent crash, it swung open and Gregory dropped down into the hallway, landing just feet from Lily. She screamed, stumbling back, but he grabbed her arm. "You're coming with me," he snarled. I didn't think. Just moved. Grabbing the bat from Daniel's hand, I swung with everything I had. The sound of it connecting with his side was sickening. He grunted, releasing Lily, but turned on me with wild eyes. "You should have stayed quiet," he growled. And then, in the distance, the sound of sirens. For a split second, his gaze flicked toward the front of the house, just enough for Daniel to tackle him to the floor. The police burst in seconds later, dragging him up and snapping cuffs around his wrists. He was shouting the entire time, calling me a liar, saying God would judge me. But just before they pushed him out the door, he twisted his head toward me and said one last thing. Quiet, almost gentle. "This isn't over, Margaret. Not until one of us is in the ground." If you want to know what happened after that night, and how this battle ended with a final confrontation I never saw coming, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. After the police hauled Gregory out of my house that night, I thought, prayed, that this would be the end. I thought they would finally see him for the predator he was and keep him locked away where he couldn't hurt anyone. But the truth about the justice system is a bitter pill. It doesn't care how scared you are. It only cares about what it can prove in court. And Gregory? Well, he knew how to play the system. Daniel told me the next morning that Gregory was being charged with breaking and entering, attempted assault, and violating a protective order. The officers who had seen him drop from my attic into the hallway had given strong statements. I had the broken glass, the bruises on Lily's arm, and weeks of harassment documented. For the first time it seemed like we actually had enough. But 3 days later, Daniel called me with the news that made my knees give out. "They set bail," he said grimly. "It's high, but not high enough for a man with the kind of support he's got." I sat heavily at the kitchen table. "You mean?" "Yeah. If someone posts it, he'll be out within hours." And someone did. By nightfall, Gregory was free again. Lily was furious. "How is this even possible? He broke into our home, Grandma. He grabbed me." I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that the knot in my stomach was back, and it was tighter than ever. We doubled down on precautions. Daniel installed motion lights all around the house. We kept the cameras running 24/7. We even added extra locks to the doors. But in my gut, I knew it wouldn't be enough. Because Gregory wasn't the type to come at you the same way twice. He'd change his tactics. And when he did, we might not see it coming. The first sign came 2 nights later. It was close to midnight, and I was in the living room knitting with the TV on low when the phone rang. The caller ID said, "Unknown." I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then, faintly, I heard it, the sound of a man breathing. "Hello," I said sharply. The breathing grew heavier. Then a whisper. Tick-tock. The line went dead. I just sat there for a moment, the receiver still in my hand, my pulse pounding in my ears. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone. Measured. Like a man who was counting down to something he knew would happen. The next morning we found deep scratches on the back door. Not the kind an animal makes. Long, deliberate marks, like someone had dragged a knife across the wood over and over. Daniel took photos, but even as he did, I could see the frustration in his eyes. "This is intimidation," he said. "He wants you scared, on edge. He wants you to make a mistake." If that was his plan, it was working. That afternoon I got a call from Sister Agnes again. "Margaret, I don't know how to tell you this, but Gregory's been visiting members of the congregation. He's telling them you've been harassing him, that you're obsessed with him. I closed my eyes, my hands curling into fists. And they believe him. Some do, she admitted. Others aren't sure what to believe anymore. It was exactly what he wanted, to turn people against me, to make me look unstable. I'd seen it before with men like him. They didn't just attack you physically. They attacked your credibility until you had no one left in your corner. That night, Daniel came over and laid out our options. We can wait for him to slip up again and call the police, he said. Or what? Yes. He hesitated. Or we can make the final move. Something in his tone made my skin prickle. What kind of move? The kind that leaves no room for doubt. The kind that exposes him in a way so public, so undeniable, that even his most loyal followers will turn on him. I didn't ask him exactly what he meant. Part of me was afraid to know. But deep down I knew I was done playing defense. So we started planning. It would happen at the next Sunday service. I would go to the church like nothing had happened. Daniel would be there, along with his retired detective friend, both armed with copies of all the footage we'd gathered, and one last piece of evidence we hadn't shown anyone yet. Because what Gregory didn't know was that the night he broke into my house and dropped from the attic, the security camera in the hallway had caught everything. Not just him grabbing Lily, but the look on his face, the words he said. It was raw, ugly, and undeniable. We were going to show it. To everyone. The days leading up to Sunday were unbearable. Barely slept. Every creak of the house made me tense. But I forced myself to hold it together because this was it. And it came. The air felt heavy, like the whole town could feel something about to break. When I walked into the church, the chatter died instantly. People watched me, their expressions a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and, from a few, quiet support. Gregory was already at the front, wearing that smug smile. The service began. Readings. And then he stepped up to the pulpit. My dear brothers and sisters, he began. Today, I want to talk about wolves in sheep's clothing. How they can come among us pretending to be part of the flock, but in truth, they are sent to destroy. It was almost word for word what he'd said the last time. Only this time I wasn't going to sit quietly. I stood up. Pastor Gregory, I said loudly. I think it's time the congregation sees the real wolf. Daniel was already moving, connecting his phone to the projector before Gregory could stop him. The footage filled the big screen at the front of the sanctuary. Gasps erupted as the video played. Gregory dropping from the attic, grabbing Lily, snarling his threats. Every word, every movement was clear as day. The room exploded. People stood up shouting. Some turned to glare at Gregory. Others just sat frozen, their faces pale. Gregory's mask shattered. His face twisted into something feral. His voice rising above the chaos. Lies. All lies. But no one was listening anymore. He stepped down from the pulpit. His eyes locked on me, and for the first time, I saw something in them that scared me more than anything else. Desperation. He started moving toward me. Yes. Daniel stepped in front of me, but Gregory didn't slow down. He shoved him aside and reached for me. Right there in front of the whole congregation. And then, suddenly, there were sirens. 2 police officers burst through the doors, rushing toward him. He froze, his hands inches from my throat. Gregory Holmes, one officer barked. You're under arrest. They pulled him back, cuffing him as the entire congregation watched in stunned silence. But as they dragged him past me, he leaned close enough for only me to hear. This isn't over, Margaret. You've only delayed it. If you want to hear how this battle finally ended, and the shocking way Gregory made one last attempt to destroy me, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. The sight of Gregory being dragged out of the church in handcuffs should have been the moment I finally breathed again. The congregation had seen the truth with their own eyes. The police had witnessed him try to lay hands on me in front of everyone. It felt like the walls he'd built around his false image had finally crumbled. But I'd learned the hard way that with men like him, the fall isn't always instant. Sometimes they thrash and claw all the way down, and take as much as they can with them. Gregory was taken straight to the county jail. This time the charges were stacked high: breaking and entering, harassment, assault, violation of a protective order, and now attempted assault in public. Daniel said the DA was confident they could make most of it stick. Still, I couldn't shake his last words to me. "This isn't over." Lily tried to reassure me. "Grandma, you have nothing to worry about now. He's locked up. Everyone saw what he did." But fear doesn't listen to logic. For the first few nights, I slept with a lamp on and a chair wedged under my bedroom door. The house was quiet, but my mind kept replaying the feel of him in my living room, the smell of peppermint on his breath, the sound of his voice twisting scripture into something filthy. A week passed. Then another. I began to relax, just slightly. I went back to tending my garden. Lily and I baked pies together again. I even went to the market without scanning every aisle for him. And that's when he struck. It was a Friday afternoon. I was home alone. Lily had gone into town to run errands. The knock at the door was so soft I almost didn't hear it. When I opened it, there was no one there. Just a package on the porch, wrapped in brown paper. No return address. I brought it inside, my heart thudding. Slowly I peeled back the paper. Inside was a small velvet box, the kind used for jewelry. Opened it, and froze. Inside was my late husband's wedding ring. The ring that had been in a locked box in my bedroom. The ring that was now missing. I stumbled back, my mind racing. How had he gotten it? He was in jail. Was someone helping him? The phone rang. I grabbed it without checking the caller ID. "Nice to see you got my gift," Gregory's voice purred. I nearly dropped the phone. "How?" I whispered. "I told you, Margaret. God provides for his servants, even from behind bars." I slammed the phone down, my hands trembling. When Lily came home, she found me sitting at the kitchen table, the ring in front of me. "Grandma, what's wrong?" I told her. Her face went pale. "That means someone's been in the house while we were gone." We called Daniel immediately. He came over within the hour, checking every lock, every window. "He's got people on the outside," Daniel said grimly. "People willing to do his dirty work." The police were contacted, but their response was the same. "We'll look into it." That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound felt like a threat. And around 2 a.m. the real threat came. The motion sensor light in the backyard snapped on. I moved to the window and saw two figures near the shed, one tall, one shorter. They were prying at the lock. I grabbed my phone and called Daniel. "They're here," I whispered. "I'm on my way. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone but me." But before Daniel arrived, the back door rattled. Then a voice, not Gregory's but a man's, low and sharp. "We just want to talk." I didn't answer. The rattling turned into pounding. Lily, who'd been sleeping, came running into the living room. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement at the front window. Another figure. They were trying to come in from both sides. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I grabbed the pepper spray from the table and positioned Lily behind me. The pounding got louder. The glass creaked under the force. And then Daniel's truck roared into the driveway, headlights flooding the yard. The figures bolted, disappearing into the dark before I could get a clear look at their faces. Daniel burst inside seconds later. "You all right?" I nodded, my breath coming in gasps. "They were trying to break in." He scanned the yard, jaw tight. "This isn't random. They were here to scare you, or worse. And they're working for him." The next morning, Daniel got a call from one of his contacts at the jail. Gregory had been overheard bragging to another inmate about sending his flock to deliver a message to me. That was it for me. I wasn't going to wait for the law to move at its snail's pace. I wasn't going to sit in my living room wondering if tonight was the night he'd send someone who wouldn't run when headlights hit them. I was going to finish this. Daniel and I spent the next 3 days putting together everything we had. Every letter, every threat, every photo, every video, even the wedding ring. We didn't just send it to the police. We sent it to the local news, the state attorney's office, and every member of the church council. The story broke within 24 hours. The headline was everywhere. Local pastor accused of harassment, stalking, and assault. People who had defended him in church suddenly went quiet. Others who had been silent before started coming forward with their own stories. Women who said he had made them uncomfortable, touched them during prayers, called them late at night. By the end of the week, Gregory wasn't just facing my case. He was facing a list of accusations long enough to bury him. The DA filed additional charges. His bail was revoked. And this time, when the judge's gavel came down, Gregory was taken away without the possibility of release before trial. Should have felt like victory. And in a way it did. But the life lesson I learned through all this burned deep into me. Evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes it wears a collar and carries a Bible. And when you stand up to it, you can't do it halfway. You have to drag it into the light and keep it there until it has nowhere left to hide. When the trial finally came, I sat in the front row every day. I looked him in the eye as the evidence played, as witness after witness testified. And when the verdict came back, guilty on all counts, I didn't cry. I just exhaled. For the first time in months I felt free. And as they led him away to serve his sentence, he turned one last time to look at me. But there was no smile this time. Only defeat. If you believe in standing up to abuse, in speaking the truth even when it's hard, please like, comment and subscribe. Your voice matters, and your courage could save someone else.